Michael Owen's story begins in Chester, where he was practically born with a football at his feet. By the time he signed for Liverpool at just 12 years old, his destiny seemed set in stone. He had pace, control, and a clinical finish, a trifecta that any coach would dream of. By 17, he was already breaking records, becoming Liverpool's youngest debutant and scorer. And if you're thinking he'd ease into stardom, think again. Owen exploded into the Premier League, netting 18 goals in his debut season and sharing the Golden Boot. Not bad for a teenager, right? Let's talk about what made Owen special. It wasn't just his blistering pace, though that certainly struck fear into defenders. It was his football IQ, the way he could read a defender's intentions, time his runs to perfection, and finish with an ice-cold precision. Whether it was a delicate dink over the keeper or a thunderous strike from the edge of the box, Owen was the epitome of a poacher who thrived on instinct. He wasn't just scoring goals, he was defining moments. By 2001, Owen had hit his peak. That year, he won the Ballon d'Or, the first Englishman to do so since Kevin Keegan in 1979. Think about it. He wasn't competing with average players. He beat the likes of Zidane, Figo, and Raul. This was Owen at his zenith, leading Liverpool to a treble of the FA Cup, League Cup, and UEFA Cup, with unforgettable performances that screamed world class. But here's the kicker. For all his brilliance, Owen's career had an undertone of what if. His Achilles heel, ironically, was his hamstrings. Injuries began to plague him just as he was supposed to step into his prime. That raw, electric pace that had once left defenders in the dust became harder to summon. And while he still scored goals, don't forget his exploits for Real Madrid, Newcastle, and Manchester United, it felt like the Owen of 1998 to 2003 was a fleeting comet rather than a consistent star. Speaking of Madrid, Owen's move to Los Galacticos was as high profile as it was polarizing. Some say it was a necessary step for any player of his caliber, but his one season there, despite a stellar goal-to-game ratio, felt like an awkward fit. Playing alongside Zidane, Ronaldo, and Beckham, Owen often found himself on the bench. He still managed 13 league goals, but you couldn't help but feel his talents weren't maximized. What about the national team? Owen's England career was as iconic as it was tragic. He scored 40 goals for his country, putting him 5th on the all-time list. But there's one moment no England fan can forget, the 2006 World Cup, when Owen ruptured his ACL just minutes into a group stage game. It was the beginning of the end for him at the elite level. Yet, Owen always carried himself with professionalism, even as his role evolved into that of a super sub at Manchester United. And here's the emotional crux. Owen's legacy is a paradox. On one hand, he's one of the most gifted strikers England has ever produced. On the other, his career feels like a Shakespearean tragedy, an endless, what could have been scenario. Would he have been even greater if not for the injuries? Or did his early rise and relentless style of play mean his body was always destined to break down? In my opinion, Owen's story is both inspiring and cautionary. He's proof that raw talent and determination can catapult you to the pinnacle of football, but also a reminder of how fragile an athlete's career can be. Despite the injuries, the criticisms, and the decline, Owen's highs, his Ballon d'Or, his World Cup brilliance, his Liverpool exploits, are enough to cement his place as a footballing legend. And here's one last stat to chew on. Michael Owen scored 150 Premier League goals, making him one of the league's top scorers. But more importantly, he did it with a style and swagger that left us breathless.